every organ in your body. So the nervous system is the control center of the body, and it governs all those physiological functions in the body. If you are in a chronic fight or flight state, then guess what? Your digestive system probably isn't working right. Your immune system probably isn't working right. Your endocrine system is probably not working right, or cardiovascular system can be affected. And it's something that causes very real illness. And it can't be underestimated how powerful.
Once bedbound, now thriving, sharing a chronic illness healing story. Our guest today on the Settle or Be Better podcast is Rachael Elizabeth, who's going to be talking to us about natural healing resources, carnivore nutrition, and own health journey. So welcome, Rachel, and over to you. Why don't you begin by telling us a little bit about your personal health and well-being story and your current work?
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be here and chat with you. I really appreciate you asking me to come on. To share a little bit about my story. So when I was about 20 years old in college, I became very sick and I was having all sorts of symptoms, and through the years was diagnosed with kind of a long list of chronic illnesses. And I think for some people it's helpful to hear that, what you were diagnosed with, so I'll share some of those. So I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder, dysautonomia or POTS, Chiari malformation, intracranial hypertension, cervical and spinal instability, celiac disease, chronic Lyme disease, gastroparesis. The list kind of goes on. And I was having really severe pain and fatigue. And at my worst, I was bedbound. And for the first few years of being sick, actually probably the first 3 or 4 years, I went the Western medicine route and I saw lots of doctors and I was given all sorts of medications and had major neurosurgeries, and yet I continued to get sicker. And there came a point where I was just so sick and I was being recommended to have more neurosurgeries, and I just felt that it wasn't the right thing. I said, this is not getting me better. If I want to get better, I need to go a different way. And something kind of just sparked in me, and I realized that I really needed to be open-minded if I wanted to get better. And I needed to be open to trying things that might feel uncomfortable or different or not what I was used to or what society had kind of breeds us to think that we need to do when we get sick. And so eventually I sort of heard of the carnivore diet, and that was kind of one of my biggest first steps towards true healing, was changing my diet. I tried lots of different diets. I was strict gluten-free for 10 years and had tried paleo, vegetarian, all sorts of different diets. And carnivore kind of kept popping up in different groups, and I became interested in it. And at the time I was really underweight. I was almost on a feeding tube and I really struggled to eat at all. So this felt like a crazy thing to try. And I just really thought that if I didn't give it a try, that I would always wonder. And so I kind of jumped right in, and it was hard at first. It was not easy. I think sometimes people kind of paint the picture that healing is easy or fast. It just isn't. But I kept with it, and I would say at about the 6-week mark, I started to see some improvements. And so I stuck with it and continued to see more and more improvements. But at a certain point in my carnivore journey, I saw a lot of healing with it. I was starting to, spend more time out of bed, less severe fatigue, less severe pain, but I was still really sick. So I started learning about the nervous system, and I started learning about how we can get stuck in this chronic survival state or chronic fight or flight state. And that's something that happens subconsciously, and it's kind of our brain's effort to protect us. But when we're stuck in that survival state for too long, then that's not a good thing. And that's where illness can happen. And it also makes it very difficult to heal if our nervous system is dysfunctional. So I started doing something called brain retraining. That has been a huge part of my healing as well. And really, I would say everything that I've been doing to heal falls under the category of healing my nervous system and regulating my nervous system. And there are so many ways to approach that, and everybody is different in what method is best for them. But that everything I've done to heal has all related back, even changing my diet has all related back to the nervous system. And that's something I've become really passionate about.
That's amazing to know, and thank you for sharing your story, this little part of your life. I mean, it takes a lot of courage to go through. I mean, I think I just saw your story this morning that you shared about having to go through the same cycle of sharing your story to so many people with probably so many on podcasts and so many interviews, right? But I mean, I'm sure that it is helping someone or the other who's listening to this, and I mean, kudos to you, and we are so glad to have been learning so much from you and your information that you put out there. So I can't wait to dive deep into our episode today. And to begin with, was there something you learned along the way about your chronic illness regarding the causes behind it? Like, was it something that was in your family, like you saw your parents or your grandparents also go through, or was it something very new for you in your family? And what did you discover what the causes behind it?
That's a really good question. I actually made a pretty detailed post about why do I think I got sick on my Instagram yesterday. And I'll kind of touch on some points that I shared there. And basically, I think I did have somewhat of a genetic predisposition to getting these illnesses. And several of the illnesses that I was diagnosed with were said to be genetic, lifelong, and incurable. And that's something that I don't agree with. And I think genetics can cause predisposition, but it doesn't determine your destiny. And genetic expression can change given nutritional state, nervous system state, and the environment that you're in. So yes, autoimmune diseases, do run in my family, and also several of my relatives have signs of connective tissue disorders. But that being said, I think it just makes me sad when people hear, oh, I have a genetic disease, and then they think there's no hope for healing. And I haven't seen that to be the case for me and for many others as well. And so that's why I want to share my story, because I want to give hope to those people that feel like they're just stuck and they just got unlucky. And I think there's so much more to it than just that's genetic. And another thing that I touched on in my post that I shared yesterday about why I got sick is I think everybody is kind of a ticking time bomb. And it's never really, I think a lot of people that become chronically ill have some sort of trigger that worsens their illness, whether that is mold or a chronic infection like Lyme disease, or whether that's stress or trauma. Stressful life events can trigger chronic illness. And I think that most often is the straw that breaks the camel's back. And so it may not be that sole cause of your illness. It's likely that one thing that tipped you over the edge and sent your nervous system into that crisis, chronic survival state where illness so often starts to develop.
Understood. Thank you for sharing that. It was very insightful. And I mean, that's very true that anytime we see someone who has a disease that's genetic, I mean, that's it. We put our hands up and we are like, okay, I can't do anything about it. There's only that much I can do about it. And what's so beautiful about your story and everything you shared is that you went through years of so many different treatments through Western medicine and through neurosurgeries. And then after all these things, after so many doctors, what really worked for you was something that is so much in our control, right? Like, I mean, we are all equipped with it. I mean, such simple things. I mean, of course, you had a lot of things to do with it, right? But after going through so many complicated procedures is when you found things that, I mean, are available to most of us today. And I feel like we can definitely make use of it, right? So to begin with, nervous system regulation, tell us a little bit more about it and why should we do it? I mean, why is it important for someone to do it who's probably not already sick, who's at an average health, who works out, who eats? Why is it important to do that? And how can we approach this?
That's an awesome question. And I think, the simple answer is we all have a nervous system, and it's very important to care for it, whether or not you're sick. And something really important to note is that our modern world is not conducive to having a healthy nervous system. There are so many things that are kind of working against us. Like, for example, the hustle culture, just stressful, high stress lifestyles where people don't learn to rest, and they think resting is a negative thing. And, ultra processed foods, that's really hard on our nervous system and our brains. What else? We've got disconnection from nature. So people don't spend much time at all outside, and really we're meant to be outside. And so that disconnection from nature, I think, is honestly one of the biggest drivers of chronic disease. And so those are just some things that I think are important to be aware of for everybody, because the best time to take care of your health is before you get really sick. And so obviously there's always hope, even if you have already gotten sick, but it's important for everyone, especially in our modern world where there are so many things that are kind of working against our health. Even environmental toxins in skincare products, so many different things. And at what point does it just become too much? And I think that's a big reason why it's becoming so normal to be sick. And some people actually probably don't even realize that they're sick because it's so normal to be tired. It's so normal to be in pain. And really, that shouldn't be normal.
That's very true. I mean, a lot of us live day in and out under so much stress, under sleeping, and probably having symptoms, our body showing us signs, but we are completely ignoring it, not just for a day, for a week, but over years, right? Because we have complete different priorities. So that makes so much sense to prioritize this. And today we have so many resources available as well, right? And to talk about brain retraining, tell us what it is exactly and how can we make use of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So brain retraining is essentially like a form of regulating your nervous system. And so with that idea is that we are trying to bring our nervous system from a more fight or flight chronic stress response state to a rest and digest or parasympathetic state where the body truly can heal. And so most of what the brain retraining I did involved a lot of visualization. And so the brain doesn't know the difference between visualization and reality. And so this can be very powerful for physical healing. And I think a lot of times people say, oh, well, I have a real illness. This couldn't work for me. And it's like, yes, of course you have a real illness. Of course you do. But that doesn't mean that rewiring your brain can't help you. Actually, it really can help you to physically heal. And there's a doctor that I can't remember the name of, but they said the cells listen. And that's something that I love, because if you don't believe that you can heal, if you don't believe that you can get better, chances are you probably won't. Something that's really big with brain retraining is letting go of limiting beliefs. So patterns of like, there's no way I can get better, or something like, well, other people might be able to heal, but my situation is unique. There's no way I could heal. That's a limiting belief, and that signals danger to your brain and actually can perpetuate that cycle of nervous system dysfunction, which in turn perpetuates the cycle of chronic illness. And so it's amazing how that nervous system state is so important for our overall health and well-being. And I always like to share that the nervous system is the control center of the body. So it governs every organ in your body. So the nervous system is the control center of the body, and it governs all those physiological functions in the body. And so if you are in a chronic fight or flight state, then guess what? Your digestive system probably isn't working right. Your immune system probably isn't working right. Your endocrine system is probably not working right, or cardiovascular system can be affected. And it's something that causes very real illness. And so, yeah, it can't be underestimated how powerful our brains are for physically healing the body. And I've just seen incredible stories of healing from anything to autoimmune disease, to cancer, to neurodegenerative diseases with rewiring the brain. And so it's just an incredible thing.
Absolutely. And something you shared was so powerful, that cells listen. And a lot of us have a tough time believing in so many of these, techniques available to us today, because we don't see a lot of doctors telling us about it, right? Like when we go to a doctor, they would prescribe us medication and probably a little bit about our nutrition, right? But not all of them go out of their way to tell us about these other amazing things available to us. And that's why I find it so hard to do something that is not being prescribed to us and take charge of our own health. And not a lot of us are trained to do that, right? Like we're not brought up to do that. So it becomes quite a difficult decision. Thank you for sharing those insights. They were really great to know.
I think, like what you were saying, it's foreign to so many of us, because it's not what we're not taught that growing up. We're not taught how to care for our nervous systems. And so I think a lot of times it takes planting seeds for people to kind of really grasp the importance of it. And like for me, I first heard about brain retraining probably 5 years before I started it. So that kind of gives you an idea of how long it took for me to say, oh, I really need to look into this and learn about it more. And that's why I share, because I know like it could take a while to change those core beliefs and become interested in something that's very different to what our modern society has kind of bred us to believe about disease.
True. And I mean, in the end, no matter how much money you have, no matter what medicine or what doctor you go to, I mean, if your belief system is not that strong enough, if you have so many of these limiting beliefs that you haven't worked on, almost nothing out there can help you completely heal. You might heal, but it might come back some years back or some years later, right? And I mean, I hear so many of my friends who have a very stressful job, who have a very busy life. They don't take out that much time for themselves to sort of work on these things, right? That they have these weird things happening in their body and they don't even know why. They're like, I'm eating on time. I'm probably even sleeping. I don't know what's happening, because they just don't have an answer. Sometimes they even go to a doctor and the doctor is confused. Like, I don't know what's happening, but okay, take this medication. Like, just see if it works and then come back to me later. And they are in this cycle of going in and out through these aches and pains and weird symptoms that their body is showing them, but they don't know what to do. And I feel like this is a great place to begin with, to sort of take a step back, take a pause, and to start with practices like brain training and a lot more out there, right? Because I feel like that would give us a better understanding of where we are and what our biology is going through and where we stand right now with our health.
Absolutely. And I always like to say that the most important part of healing comes from within. And so I think a lot of people want that quick fix, like a medication or a supplement or something else to get them better. But really, the most important part of healing has to come from you. That's a hard mindset shift to make, because we all just want that quick and easy fix, but there really isn't one. And it takes work and time, but it's possible to heal. And that's something that I really want to share, is that healing is possible. And I think, like you said, that people struggle to believe that healing is possible for them and struggle to let go of those limiting beliefs. And something I like to suggest to people is to just start with a curiosity. So say, like, what if I could heal? What if I could get better? What if maybe I won't be sick forever? What if I could heal like this other person I heard about that has healed? And so that can kind of start that process in your brain of, it starts to signal safety to just be curious. And that will later kind of evolve into belief and knowing that you can heal. But that doesn't happen overnight, and that's okay. But just starting with the curiosity, like, what if I could?
That's a beautiful thought, and something we can all definitely go on with thinking about and working on your health and well-being. So thank you for sharing that with us. And moving on to my next question is, what are your learnings that have been so far on low-tox living? Have you made a shift of moving out of the city or something like that over the last few years, or did you always? I didn't get the chance to exactly read about your whereabouts, but I think you shared something about being in a space where it's near to the forest or a farmland, right? So did you make this shift while you were, going through this healing journey? Did you live in the city before? How was it like? And what are your tips on low-tox living today?
Yeah, so I have always kind of lived in a suburb, and during my healing journey did move. If you can see the forest behind me, we live on a little bit of land, and it's very peaceful. It's been a very healing environment for me. And so I've never had experience with living in a true city. Just moving out to where there's a bit more space has been very healing for me. But as for low-tox living, that's something that I've definitely made an effort to implement. And I think kind of my heart behind that is just trying my best to do everything I can to support my body and to support my nervous system so that I can heal. And I think sometimes within the low-tox and non-tox living community, there can be a lot of fear. That in itself can be very unhealthy. And that's another stressor for the nervous system, to be afraid of these toxins. And I think it's important to realize that our bodies are strong. They're capable of handling lots of things, but because our modern environment is so unnatural to live in, it makes a difference to make an effort to minimize that toxic load as much as you can. but not in a way that's inducing fear and not in a way that's just stressful and like, oh, I have to do everything perfect or, and so some things that I've done is I've, shifted to using non-toxic and natural skincare products. I just kind of have a rule of thumb. Like if I put it on my skin, I want to recognize all the ingredients and have it be very simple and just nourishing for my skin. And I don't use scented candles and stuff like that anymore. And I have switched my cookware to being stainless steel or cast iron and just little things like that. But I think sometimes, somebody that's just starting out with kind of wanting to move towards low-tox living sees somebody else who's been on this journey for years and says, wow, I have to make all these changes overnight. This is so stressful. Like that, I think just isn't a healthy way to approach it. And so I always just like to share, just do your best. Take it one step at a time and be proud of yourself every effort because that's making a difference, and do the best that you can with whatever your budget is. If money is an issue, then go to the thrift store. You could probably get a cast iron pan for just a couple of dollars, or clothes that are made with natural materials for very, very cheap. And so there are ways that you can do this that aren't extremely expensive. Yeah, I just always like to keep in mind, like, it's okay if I'm not perfect all the time with that. I make my best effort, and that'll be enough, and so those are kind of my thoughts on low-tox living. I think it's important, but it is also important to approach it with a healthy mindset.
Right, of course. I mean, it definitely can get very overwhelming when we talk about low-tox living. I mean, so many people out there are just talking about just throw this stuff out of your house. Just don't use it right now. Just completely have a, makeover for your house, for your kitchen, for everything. And it's like, I can't do this. I don't even know where to begin with, right? So that's what happens usually when we see such videos and such speakers. But I feel like definitely we can take those small steps and do whatever is doable in the moment, because in the end, that one thing is not going to be governing our complete health, but there's just so much more to do with your complete lifestyle change, right? And talking about that, what are your health non-negotiables today? I mean, after years of learning so much about your own body, about your own health, healing yourself, and this journey, what is it today that you do? What does a week in your life look like, or day in your life look like, where you know that these are your health non-negotiables?
Yeah. So I would say eating nourishing foods, prioritizing animal-based protein and fat, that's definitely a non-negotiable for me and has been very impactful for my healing. And another thing is to try to get natural light in my eyes for my circadian rhythm when I wake up. So I don't look at my phone at night. And if I do happen to wake up in the morning when it's still dark outside, I'll wear my blue light blockers if I need to look at a screen before going outside. But I always want to spend time outside, get morning sunlight, and just try to help with that circadian rhythm. And I think honestly one of my biggest things is just trying to spend as much time as I can outside, even if it's a day where like I just can only go outside for a couple of minutes every few hours or whatever, but like making that effort to get fresh air, to get that natural light in my eyes, and to just connect with nature for even just a few minutes. That is something that's really important to me.
Understood. These were some amazing insights. Thank you so much, Rachel. And that brings us to the end of the episode today. As we conclude, do you have any last messages or thoughts to leave us with?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I think my biggest thought that I would love to share with people, if you're in a dark place right now, if you are struggling with severe mental illness, whatever it may be, just know that there's hope. So many people are recovering even from the worst of places. And if there's anything you can do to just let yourself believe that healing could be possible for you, that can really make all the difference.
Absolutely. That's a lovely message. Thank you once again, Rachel, for being here today and for everything that you're doing with so much courage and sharing your story. For the ones who don't already follow you, there'll be links in the description below. They can reach out to you, learn a lot more from you, and watch your journey more closely. So thank you once again for being here. It was a very insightful episode talking to you.
Thank you so much, Sakshi.